Hello, everybody. Welcome to week 4 of EDUC 8023 Research and Evaluation of Curriculum. You guys are doing a wonderful job. I just kind of wanted to review where we've been. So, in week 1, we really talked a lot about an introduction to curriculum and instruction. I'm going to go back here to our topics. So, we talked about an introduction to curriculum and instruction, what it is. In week 2, we talked more about philosophy of education. And then we got into the historical foundations of curriculum policy. And so this is kind of a foundation of what we're going to be learning about curriculum. Today we're going to be, or this week, we're going to talk about Module 4, and that is psychological and social foundations of curriculum, because all of this is going to kind of we need all of this in our understanding of our final project, which is going to be a paper where you're going to be evaluating a curriculum that you're familiar with. So that's kind of the big picture. And let's go to the AIM section and look at what we're going to be learning this week. So this week we want to explain the major psychological theories, and some of you, we've already learned some of this because some of these things align with some of the philosophical foundations. So we're going to talk about behaviorism, constructivism, socialism, social learning, and their impact on curriculum design. We're going to analyze the influence of social context. So talk about culture, equity, community. All of these social contexts influence curriculum, and that's a big part of what we're going to be talking about today. We want to evaluate psychological and social foundations and talk about how they shape curriculum, and then apply theoretical knowledge to assess how foundational assumptions are embedded in a real-world curriculum. And hopefully when I get through this, it'll help you to understand that a little bit better. So today we're going to be reading, I go to the Learn part here. Start my module. We're going to be reading chapter 4 and 5, Psychological and Social Foundations, in your textbook. And then you have one article, Better with Practice, Changes in Pre-Service Teacher Psychological Literacy by Counseling Pupils on Their Self-Regulated Learning. And so those will be your readings. So got a little bit to read this week. So let's talk about, I did want to show you your textbook for a second here. So I'm going to put it online here. Okay, so here we have chapter 4 is the first chapter you're going to be reading is that psychological foundations of curriculum and instruction. So you're going to be looking at, and this probably will be review things like cognitive psychology. Of course, that's and the works of like Montessori method. We're going to look at Jean Piagetian theories. That's very important. And Piaget was huge, and his work, his theory, helped curriculum designers know how to sequence learning activities because of that theory. Going to read about Tyler, Taba, Brunner, and Kohlberg, all important theorists that helped shape curriculum design. And so that's what you'll be reading for chapter 4. That's going to be the psychological foundations. And then we get to, I'm going to skip over to chapter 5. So there's our conclusion, all the notes. Hope your eyes are okay. Okay, then we get to the social foundations of curriculum and instruction. So you'll be talking about the relationship between schools and society. And I think when we looked at the history, you're going to see this. We're going to look at, what's the difference between education and schooling. So you'll read this about social foundations of education. And I think you'll see how it kind of aligns with the historical part that you read, and how social you have to consider those social foundations when you think about curriculum. So we'll be talking about, things like moral education. How does that reflect our society? Moral conduct, controversy, moral teaching, moral character, performance character. All of these are things that um, it is impacted by where our society is right now. And so uh, I hope that'll be an interesting read. So that's what you're going to be reading. Now I'm going to go back to my week here, and we're going to talk about what you're going to be, your 2 assignments this week. Okay, so your first assignment is you're going to do a discussion post. And the discussion post is it says, this week we explored the psychological and social foundations of education. As Christian educators, we also reflect on how these foundations align with our biblical principles of teaching and learning and human purpose. So, for this discussion post, I have written down 4 common curriculum models. They're very simple right now, but we're going to get into these in more detail. I also put a couple of videos about these also under content that you can look at. So I just gave some simple curriculum models. The Tyler, a lot of us are familiar with Ralph Tyler and the Tyler model. We have the TABA model. Those of you in special education know the universal design model, and then the content input process and product model. So these are some models, and I just put which one of these models above resonates most with you, what aspects make sense in your teaching. And then you're going to say, how does this model connect to one of the psychological or social foundations from this week's reading? So how does it link to that? So let's say that you picked the Tyler model. You may talk about how that aligns with Piaget's theories. So you have to explain that. And then the last part is, how might this model affirm biblical truth, such as the value of the learner, the call to diligence, stewardship, or the importance of learning in community? Those are just some that I have. I'm sure you'll have other things that you could do. Then, of course, you need to reply to at least one classmate. And we're looking for additional questions to help them go deeper. You might offer resources, but we want to extend that conversation. So that's the first thing you're doing. Then you have a paper. And this paper is called Curriculum Foundations Analysis, What's on the Menu? And so what I've done is I've listed a lot of different instructional frameworks. Some are based on entire methods. Some are programs. Some are even singular in nature. These are just some that I've brainstormed. You can use your own too if you have something that you want to do. So I'm just going to, and I'm going to give an example. So you'll pick something like direct instruction, project-based learning, Abeka, maybe Wilson. If you've used Wilson, if you're a reading teacher, UFly. I use UFly. Some of you used Heggerty. All right, you know what? I'm thinking about a different class. Heggerty is a program for phonological awareness. And so pick a program or something that's not on here. So we want to pick an instructional framework so you can use these, or something that you're currently using. Maybe it's something that you're using and you don't know the research on it. You need to explain in your paper which theory or theories of learning develop underlie this curriculum. How are concepts like motivation, readiness, or cognition embedded in that framework? You need to talk about social foundations, like what society needs, the cultural values. Does it address equity issues? Who benefits from this curriculum in society? And the implications. How does understanding its foundation help you critique or implement it more thoroughly? You need to talk about maybe assumptions during the curriculum. Consider how the curriculum has been embedded or promoted, and is there any policy related to this in particular? There is now for this, you can do a paper or a visual presentation. Either one is fine, but I did want to explain. So, part of this will be assessed. Did you have a thorough and accurate explanation of the psychological theories influence the curriculum? Did you have insightful analysis of the social influences? Things, maybe the context. And I'm going to give you an example. Did you articulate how the curriculum is influenced by policy, maybe at the state level or national level? Are you supporting your claims with scholarly sources? And then is it an APA? Now, if you do a presentation, it's fine. I just want you to use in-text citations in your slide or in your presentation and then have some kind of a reference list. So it's either or, a paper or a multimedia presentation. You can do either one. So I'm going to give you an example of something that you might use. So when I was a principal for Department of Defense, we used a reading program called Benchmark Advance. And it's just a basal series. Okay, so I'm going to use Benchmark as an example because I'm very familiar with it. Um, this was the pacing guide. The last school I was at, I was a principal at a pre-K through second grade school. So Benchmark Advance again is a basal series, and so it had whole group curriculum. It had for small groups, everything. Uh, Benchmark was this shows us our scope and sequence. So when teachers should start teaching, what units they should be on, and the instructional time. Uh, so, for example, Unit 1 was to start on September 16th after they have given their interim and set routines and procedures. And that strand was on government and citizenship. Um, at that time, teachers knew they should launch their writer's workshop, and this they were going to do narrative writing in second grade. So we can see that this went. You had a government unit, so that's social studies. Then we had a unit on a literary unit, and then a science unit. Then we went back to a literary unit, and then we had a science unit, literary, and a social studies. So, one thing I really liked about this curriculum is that it had literary, nonfiction, and it had literary, but then it also flipped between social studies and science. And so, one thing I did as a principal, I told my teachers, and this was a little controversial, but I said, instead of teaching social studies and science the same day, I'm fine with you doing units. So they might do a social studies unit and then they would do a science unit, and it would align with whatever they were doing in their reading. So, just a little bit of background about Benchmark Advance. So, if I was going to use this for my paper, I might talk about the fact that, and I'm looking at my notes here, that Benchmark Advance really does. I'm going to talk about the psychological foundations first. It really aligns with constructivism. Because students have to build meaning through reading and discussion. That means the teacher has to do a lot of scaffolding. It also has elements of Vygotsky's social cultural theory, and that is because we're doing small groups. We're allowing discussion. Students have to talk amongst each other. And there is some behaviorist underpinnings because there's a lot of systematic um, uh, phonics in the program. Motivation, readiness, cognition. Motivation is addressed by really trying to do high interest books. So the books have some, Benchmark has some really good high interest books that kids are interested in. I think the social studies and science, adding that in helps with motivation. Readiness is addressed. Readiness is going to help with motivation because there's a lot of scaffolded, the I do, we do, you do approach. Social foundations. It's shaped by the push for we really want equity with standards. And it was a byproduct of the Common Core standards. It emphasized a lot of complex text because we want all students to be exposed to the same curriculum that has a high level text. and it was really designed as a concern for this literacy gap. There's an effort to include lots of different types of reading from diverse authors, perspectives, so forth. Some of the When you think about social foundations, we know that students in well-supported schools and trained teachers benefit the most, uh, because they are going to struggling readers, ELL students benefit from highly trained teachers. And so, one of the things that Benchmark tried to do is have scaffolded lessons, have lots of teacher notes, have lots of teachers support, and that in turn supports the societal needs. Some of the implications. There's that balance of balancing rigor with scaffolding. It is very rigorous, but we also know that we have to scaffold it. Benchmark assumes that learners can learn toward grade level complex text, and those of you that have worked in very challenging schools know that sometimes that's not always true. Um, and so the philosophy is that equity comes from equal access to grade level content. And so that's an assumption that maybe not isn't always accurate. Some of the policy behind Benchmark. It's been widely adopted in districts seeking the Common Core alignment, also with the science of reading. Some educators don't like it because it's very scripted. They say it limits teacher autonomy. At the federal level, Every Student Succeeds Act emphasized, of course, that you have to have evidence-based curriculum, and Benchmark Advanced was one of those that was on the list of approved list, and so that really boosted their popularity. And so, of course, you want to be a curriculum, you want to design curriculum that's on those state-approved lists, because then states will buy it, and that'll make you more money. So the last thing I want to show you is something that, as you're looking at your programs and so forth, I just want this to be a resource for you. And so this is Hattie's. I hope you've heard of this. This is John Hattie. He did something called Visible Learning, and where he took, and I'm going to show you the meta-analyses of various teacher programs, and I'll show you here in a minute. But I first wanted to review effect size. Let's see if I can make it bigger. Okay, there we go. So just as a reminder, and you'll need to know this when you work on your dissertation, because you guys will be looking at effect size. So when you look at effect size, effects greater than 0.4 accelerate student learning. So if you have, and some of these that are 1.6, those are huge effect sizes. So anything over like 0.4, that means students are going to learn. Anything over like 1 or greater is big effect size. So what he did is he did a meta-analysis of just literally hundreds and hundreds of programs, teaching techniques, and said, are they helpful or not? For example, retention has reverse effects. And I think I mentioned to some of you, I always find that interesting because in Florida, there is a policy that you have to retain third graders if they are not reading proficient. But yet we know that research shows that has a reverse effect. It does not help kids. As a matter of fact, it hurts kids. But yet it is a policy in Florida. Don't know why. That policy had to have been a political decision, not an educational decision. Things like suspensions, lack of sleep, all of these, summer vacation, even a negative effect, some that aren't that great, web-based learning, team teaching. You may think, what? Some of these things don't have great effect size. One of the best effect sizes, collective teacher efficacy, teacher credibility, teacher clarity. Look at all those things that show what the teacher is doing. Having a great teacher is going to help students. And so I will post this link also, but I wanted you to just see it. So what you can do is you can look at various, there's a filter here. So I put potential to considerably to accelerate. Um, so this means they're high. And I just said, okay, so that means, we want a high effect size. And over here has the effect size. So you can see these have like at least their point 0.4 or greater. And so as I'm going through these are just some that I have that are pretty high. I can see culturally sustaining practices had a 1. Uh, culturally, let me see. So what I'd like, if you want, what you could do is I'm going to put in curricula over here. So I just put in some curriculum and I was like, okay, what curriculum shows to be positive? Well, 0.97 outcome-based education. That was a pretty high effect size. Phonics instruction, 0.97, high. Phonological awareness, 0.83, high. Repeated reading, high. Science conceptual change programs, high. So these are some that are very high. Then I'm going to go to teacher. What are some practices for teachers? Collective efficacy, micro teaching. Micro teaching is very high. At Southeastern, we are really trying to get more micro teaching in our undergrad classes. It has big effect size, teacher credibility, very important. So I just wanted to show you this so that this might be a way that you can look at research. Uh, I bought the textbook because I think it's just so valuable to have that textbook, but it might give you a starting point to look up some of your research. So today you're going to be again, you have your discussion post, and then you also are going to do your paper. And the point of this paper is looking at a curriculum. I know some of you, I have one person said, I want to do classical education. Some of you can use something, do something that you are using, that you're interested in. Maybe it's a Becca. I know some of you talked about Becca and Bob Jones, some of you that are in Christian schools. What are the psychological foundations of it? What are the social foundations? What's implications and policy context? So the whole point I'm trying to get talking about, the history and philosophy, all of this impacts curriculum. It's not in a bubble. And so that's your assignment for this week. If you have any questions, just reach out. And you guys are doing a phenomenal job. I'm so proud of you. I know it's hard, but hard things are worth it. And only about 2% of the people in the United States have a doctorate, and that's because it's difficult. So thank you for sticking with it. Thank you for not giving up, and thank you for being persistent. Bye bye.